Hello and welcome to this episode of Hospitality Talks. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Katy Moses. I am the founder and MD of KAM Media. I am today joined by Harry Crowther, who is the founder of Grape. So we have a wine specialist on, which for those of you that know me will understand just how excited I am to speak to him. Harry, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to just tell people a little bit about yourselves and about Grape?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you very much, Katy, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Harry Crowther. I am the founder of Grape, which is essentially modern, profitable wine training and consultancy with a focus on helping the on-trade sell better wines more often.
Thank you very much. A succinct and perfect introduction. Tell me, Harry, I'm going to start with a wide question, but what has the pandemic meant for wine in hospitality?
I mean, it's a tough question to answer in one. Obviously, the wine trade is done okay in terms of consumption because the off trade has picked up so much of the on trade consumption. But I think what the pandemic has amplified is a systemic problem that was there in the first place, and that is the consumer sort of drinking less, but this tendency to spend a little bit more on a bottle of wine. And obviously now health concerns, etc., have been amped up. So there's obviously going to be much less footfall. So the need for operators and the need for the on-trade to increase their average spends per glass, per bottle, per customer, whatever, is now that's all just been turned up. And I think that's been that's been the most telling thing for me to come out of this. Is just the problem was already there, and COVID's just really put that under the spotlight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's exacerbated the problems that we already had in the industry. And you talk about selling wine in a more sort of confident way. You talk about helping operators to understand wine, but you're not really just talking about the sort of the terroir and the grapes themselves, are you? You're talking more about the skill of selling. Is that right?
Absolutely. And actually, I think there's a huge difference here between knowledge and confidence. And at the end of the day, confidence sells day in, day out, particularly in the service environment when the frontline staff are dealing with guests. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't know how to apply that within the service environment, I think it's sort of, it doesn't really mean anything, to be quite honest with you. So what I like to do with customers, or just with anyone, even across my social media channels, is just really push this idea of getting teams wine confident and getting them into that state of mind where they can talk about wine with confidence with their guests. And people buy from people. So if you've got a server who can accurately talk about a wine in a way that works for them, then that's so much more powerful. And we all know that I think it's something like 50% of consumers will trade up or will take a recommendation if it's given to them. So it's really just giving operators the confidence to put wine in a language that works for them, and then the confidence to then go and try and sell those wines to their guests. And it's not about making more money. I mean, a huge part of it is, but it's also about increasing the experience as well. And and then that obviously ensures repeat visits, word of mouth, etc. So confidence is, for me, more important than knowledge, particularly in maybe more in the casual dining sector. Anyone that doesn't have a sommelier, that's got to be the focus ahead of knowledge, and the knowledge will come with a bit of experience.
And of course, hospitality is going to have to fight pretty hard to get people off their sofas and back in through their doors. And I can go and buy a nice bottle of wine from anywhere. I can have it delivered to me, or I can go and pick it up. Either way, what I can't do is understand that bottle of wine, understand where it's come from, understand what it goes well with, understand the provenance of it and the story behind it. So presumably that's an area where hospitality can kind of excel and help to increase that experience for consumers.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, there's been some really interesting insights coming out into the public eye recently about wines from emerging regions. And, it's hospitality where maybe someone that doesn't quite have the confidence to buy, I don't know, a Romanian or a Slovenian wine off the shelf, they would go to have that experience, and they would go to sort of almost be subconsciously, they want to be pushed into trying that. So it's important that the on-trade gets a good grasp of that. And I think what Grain to Grape, does well, is gives staff the confidence to talk about wine, and that actually comes from a tasting skills element. But then after that, I really help these guys to implement upsell strategies on a wine by wine basis, which they can then apply to the content that we actually teach them. So, yes, it's the best arena for selling wines that that aren't Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, or a Malbec from Argentina or something like that. And do you know what? Consumers really do want it. They don't know it, but they want it.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that trying new things as well has become quite a trend during the pandemic. So we've actually done some research ourselves, and if we look at sort of from the beer side of things, we've seen that consumers have been much more interested in trying new things, in experimenting, and really, because every day is a bit Groundhog Day, isn't it? So you've got to have, even if it just means you're having a new wine at the end of the day, that's still a little bit better than the same old. Wine generally, in my experience, I worked in research in wine for some time now, is a very face-to-face, personable industry. How is the industry going to cope? How is the industry going to communicate with each other post-pandemic?
I think it's a really good question, and I've been speaking to multiple producers, obviously overseas, who have been thinking about how they communicate with their customers in the new normal. A lot of these guys aren't going to be jumping on a plane anytime soon. So, and likewise with the supply chain as well. So I think that there's got to be real consideration as to how that's communicated with the frontline staff, and I think trainings are a huge part of that. So, particularly from my end, I've gone down the sort of digital route with Grain to Grape, and I'll be launching later on in April. And it's not just a wine training app that helps people upsell wine, but it's actually a communications channel as well. And I've gone to producers and I'm speaking to them and I'm saying, look, we can track those communication channels. We can track the open rate, the screen time that people are on them, which I think is really cool. And that's all just to feed back to the producers, to feed back to the suppliers, so we can say, well, this is working, this isn't working, so on and so forth. And I just think it's a new outlet for communication in a world where we're not going to have as many people in a room. We're not going to be traveling overseas. Likewise, producers coming here to do those really fun trainings anymore. So sadly, it's a people's industry, and there's no one who's more of a people's person than me. But sadly, it does look like it's going. A lot of the comms will be going digital. Will be going online, and it's a great way to measure comms and to measure training as well, which is also something that I think has been a big problem in the wine trade, particularly, is this sort of obligatory training that just gets thrown at an operator, and they talk about soil or oak for an hour, and they just tick this training box, and it actually doesn't work. But this is, I guess, going digital is a new way to measure the training, and of course those communications, which can be fed back to the producers, and then the producers will know what type of comms work, and they can maybe help. We can maybe help them do focused sort of campaigns around what people are going to engage with the most, I suppose.
And I think that's another area of hospitality, isn't it, that has really thrived in this time, is the idea of digital taking over from that sort of personal face-to-face service. And of course it's not going to replace it. We're hospitality, the clue's in the name. Obviously we still want to be getting together and I want to be trying the wines. I don't just want to be being described what they're like, and I want to be doing that in a room with other people, not just at my laptop, on a tasting session. But in the meantime, that is what we're going to be doing. Talk to me a little bit more then about, the app sounds fantastic, and we'll link to your socials. So anyone that wants to know a little bit more about Grain to Grape and the app, we'll link to your socials on this. What sort of top tips would you sort of give to anybody watching about selling wine over the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
The content is split into two halves. The first half is about getting your team wine confident, and that focuses on tasting skills. But that's sort of my approach to tasting skills, which sort of strips back all the sort of poncy tasting note rubbish.
Say bullshit on this podcast.
Yeah, it strips back all this bullshit. And It just helps people build their own tasting notes in a way that works for them, and then that's going to help them talk about the wines with much more confidence. But I think in terms of top tips, I think that it's operators, because we need to start breeding more of an upselling culture. Operators really need to be focusing on what I call the base wines on their wine list, and the base wines are the wines that are sold most commonly. Okay, and that could be the cheapest wine on the list, or not. So I said earlier, I said Sauvignon Blanc or Malbec from New Zealand and Argentina respectively. They're never really the cheapest wines on the list, but they are what we call the base wines. The base wines are the wines that people order the most of, and it's all about focusing on your base wines, teaching your team as much information as they can have on the base wines, and then what I call offer choice away from them. And when you offer choice away from them, you need to, as a team, focus on 2 wines, maybe a mid-priced and then a mid to high-priced, and then really offer that range. And the reason behind offering a range is, I said earlier, it's about a 50% chance of getting a recommendation out of someone. If you offer 1 wine, then there's a 50-50 chance they won't go for it. But if you're offering 2 more wines, they've got 3 wines there, and actually there's still an even chance, which means there's a 66% chance of them actually trading out of a base wine. So knowing your base wines and then using what I call the 50-50 rule, and the first 50% of whatever you're recommended should be about the base wine. And psychologically, what that actually does is that puts the customer at ease. Okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. He knows the wine that I've ordered. It's the cheapest wine, and he's not trying to force me away from that. And then just finishing up what you're saying, just with what I call a couple of calibrated words, just to sort of psychologically push them towards one of those 2 sort of offer choices. And then maybe just finishing up with this sort of herd mentality of suggesting the sort of product's popularity. Maybe this is a great wine amongst the team, or it's a really good wine with, that the staff, that our customers love to order as well. But yeah, really focusing on a base wine, your most commonly sold wines, and then having a real structure, an upselling structure and strategy of how you're going to get people to trade out of them is a really good place to start.
Brilliant. Thank you, Harry. That was really educational, and I'm now going to be on the lookout for anyone that tries to upsell me wine from the 12th of April, and I'm going to be seeing whether they're following that structure or not. Thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all the best with launching the new app, and look forward to seeing you in real life when you can actually teach me something a little bit about wine once we drink it.
I look forward to it. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and good luck with everything, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.